Welcome, lads. We begin a new section today. Quite an important one.
Hi, Rabbi.
God, good.
How's your lunch?
Welcome back.
Okay, good. How's it, guys?
Nathan.
Thank you.
Okay, let us hit it. So we start a brand new section today. It's a very big mitzvah. It's a mitzvah not to tell Loshon Hara. There are a few mitzvahs involved in that, not to speak badly about somebody else. In fact, our sage just said, I'm sure he'll say it, we'll speak about it in a moment, how it's a very, very important one, quite a serious transgression, and one that is pretty hard to avoid. So perhaps by learning about it, we will remind ourselves of its importance and be encouraged not to make that mistake. Okay, here we go. So the Torah says, Lo yiseilech Rachel ba'abecha. Do not be a Rachel, a talebearer among your people. There should not be. Now, what constitutes a Rachel, a talebearer? So he's already translated into English, but what would the Hebrew word Rachel mean? So this is carrying gossip and going from one to the other, saying, so-and-so said this. I have heard such and such about so-and-so. So to go around and to basically trade information about people, not for money, but just for, I guess, good conversation. So actually the Hebrew word Rachel is also used as somebody who is a peddler, who goes and he takes goods and he gives some goods and buys some goods. So this is somebody who's kind of playing with and trading with different things about different people. Now, even though what he's saying is true, and it's not even saying anything bad about the person, this is still a violation of a negative commandment. This is still something that the Torah prohibits. In other words, to just go around talking about this person did this and this person said that, that itself is in its own right already a sin, even if not a single bad thing has been said. It is a grave sin which causes the death of Jewish people. Because of this, the law against talebearing is followed by the verse, do not stand by the blood of your neighbor. Think about what happened in the case of Doeg the Edomite, who told Shaul, so King Saul, that Achimelech gave David, who Saul was after, Saul was trying to catch David, and Doeg told King Saul that Achimelech had given David food and a sword. So David had found refuge by Achimelech, and Doeg the Edomite told Saul, who was pursuing David, that Achimelech had looked after David, even though what he said was true. And it did not reflect just on Achimelech, but he had not done anything wrong. He just gave him food. And even if Shaul himself had asked Achimelech, he would have told him what he had done. But he had no intention to sin against Shaul. In other words, he was just feeding King David. It wasn't like he was acting against King Saul. It happened to be that King Saul was looking to catch King David, but not King David yet, but to catch David. But he just fed David. Despite this, the talebearing of Doeg caused many Kohanim to be killed. So actually, Shaul HaMelech was furious about this information, and he went and he killed a lot of people. So we see how, even though what he said wasn't anything bad, and it was something he could have technically found out by himself, nonetheless, just transferring information about people is in its own right already problematic. So that is the issur of rechilos. Rechilos means to speak information about other people. Now we come to something which is much worse than rechilos, and is included in rechilos, and that's that which you are more familiar with. Just give me a moment, adjusting my screen. Sorry, I had a little hiccup over here with the technology. Okay. So there's a much graver sin than the talebearing, than rechilos. which is classified under the prohibition that is slander, meaning Loshon Hara, which is speaking of someone's shame. Again, even if it is true. But a person who spreads lies about others, is guilty of besmirching someone's name. So that's Motzi Shem Ra. So you have three different violations over here. Rechilos is where you're not even saying something bad, but you're still talking about other people. Loshon Hara is when you say something bad and it's true. And then Motzi Shem Ra is when you say something that's not true about somebody. You actually spread lies, and that's not even what we're speaking about over here. A slanderer is a person who says so-and-so has done such and such, so-and-so were his parents, such and such, I heard about him, and he relates shameful things. Regarding a person who speaks Loshon Hara, the Torah says, may Hashem cut off all smooth-talking lips, the tongue that speaks haughty words. So Hashem should cut off such a tongue that instead of being used to add holiness to the world, he is speaking badly about somebody else. Even a person who listens to Loshon Hara is worse than the one who said it in a certain way. The heavenly decree against our forefathers in the wilderness was sealed only because they committed the sin of slander, meaning that they spoke about the land, that the land of Israel was a bad land. We're talking about the spies, when the spies came back with a bad report. And because of that, an entire generation wasn't able to go into the land of Israel. Okay, so I mean, it's a pretty hard thing to avoid. So to what extent do we need to go to avoid this? So if a man asks someone, where can I find fire? And he replies, I'll tell you where you can find fire. In the house of so-and-so where there's plenty of meat and fish, and they are always cooking something, even that is considered slander. So he now is adding to it. He's saying slander could be even if what you're saying isn't bad, but you're implying or you're causing a person to think badly about somebody else. So all the guy was asking for was, where can I find the fire? And you went on and you started speaking about how much food they have in their house. And there's nothing wrong with having lots of food, but you were intimating something. Maybe you were intimating that they were gluttonous, or maybe you were intimating that that you're not happy about the wealth that they have. So not only should you be careful not to speak or listen to bad words, but not even words that lead to a bad words being said or bad things being thought about the person. And then we have something else, and that is what's called avak Loshon Hara, which is the dust of Loshon Hara. So it's not actual Loshon Hara itself, but it leads to Loshon Hara, which is pretty much what we're leading into from the previous halacha. So what are examples of this? If someone says, no, let's not talk about so-and-so, I'm not going to tell you what happened. So you can quite understand by saying, let's not talk about so-and-so, I'm not going to tell you what happened. You've already said a lot. You've said that such a person is not worth talking about, which is very slanderous. Or words that to that effect. Likewise, if you tell him someone's virtues in the presence of his enemies, this constitutes a milder nuance of slander, for this will prompt his enemies to tell derogatory things about him. So if you're sitting by the table and you know that somebody is really upset about somebody, then you got to judge it. You got to be very careful. This is a question I often get asked in this context, that, you know, what happens if you just want to share good things about somebody? Should you be telling good things about people? The answer is yes, unless it's in a context that's going to cause bad things to be said. So if you know that the guy that Reuven does not like Shimon, then don't go to Reuven and start saying, you know, Shimon, he's such an awesome guy, because you're obviously going to provoke Reuven to say the reverse. I mean, this takes a lot of common sense and I guess EQ, you know, being aware of, because ultimately, if somebody does think badly about somebody, you would want to give a better image. If Reuven hates Shimon, you would want to help Reuven have more of an appreciation for Shimon. But you're not going to achieve that by just saying, you know, Shimon's such a good guy, because Reuven will say he's not. Rather, you would find a gateway, also if it's, you know, maybe more intimate context, one-on-one. Say, I know that you're really not happy about Shimon, but, you know, would you be interested to hear another side? And if he says no, then you know that now's not the time. So again, this really takes mostly common sense. Concerning this, Shlomo HaMelech said, He that praises his friend with a loud voice when rising early in the morning, it will be counted as a curse to him. So again, he's saying the context for proclaiming his virtues will cause him harm. So don't speak the good of somebody in the face of his enemies, which will cause them to only speak more bad about him. Also, when a person slanders in a jesting or jocular manner, as if he were not speaking out of hatred, he is guilty of a milder form of slander. So, no, we're just joking. Don't worry, nothing serious. As we know, if you're joking and what you're saying is not very nice, then that doesn't make it any nicer. Just because you're joking, it's still what would be called avak Loshon Hara, dust of Loshon Hara. Like King Solomon says, as a man who pretends to play and shoots firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, "Look, I'm only joking." So no, I'm just shooting arrows. I mean, I might be killing people, but it's just a game. It's just a game. So obviously, even in the context of a joke, it would be inappropriate to speak badly about somebody. Equally guilty is a person who slanders with slyness by pretending to speak innocently, as if he were unaware that what he says is slander. And when he is taken to task for this, he says, "Oh, I didn't know that was slander, or so-and-so actually did these things." So somebody pretends that he's all innocent, and he's just saying, "Oh, I happened to see so-and-so in this or this place. Oh, you weren't allowed nobody was allowed to be there. Oh, I would never mention anything. But really, you know very well that nobody was allowed to be there, but you pretended to be innocent and to share information that way." So these are all examples of what's called avak Loshon Hara, which are not when you actually say that so-and-so did something bad, but nonetheless, what you're saying is making him look bad. Okay. So these are all things that are included in Loshon Hara. Let's see some more details. So Loshon Hara applies whether you're in the presence of the subject or not. If someone relates Loshon Hara regardless of whether in the presence or in the absence of the other fellow, or if he tells things that would cause damage to someone else, either to his person or to his property, or even if he only intended to annoy or to frighten him, that all constitutes Loshon Hara, slander. But if these things had already been told in the presence of three persons, it may be assumed that they have become known. And if one of the three persons tells them once more to other people, it is not Loshon Hara, provided he did not repeat it with the intention to spread the rumor and give it added publicity. What procedure should a man follow to avoid falling into the trap of Loshon Hara? If he is a Torah scholar, he should engross himself in the study of the Torah, and if he is unlearned, he should practice humility. Okay, so there were two very independent points over here. The first point in here is, whenever I read this, I used to kind of be somewhat disturbed about it. According to the law, Loshon Hara only applies if you're not sharing something that everybody already knows. But that's provided that you're not looking to spread it. So if you turn on the radio and you heard something bad about somebody, and then you come home and you want to tell your wife that, I'm so upset to just hear that this person was just convicted of this and this. So you're not looking to spread it. Rather, you're sharing it just with your family, something that that that's not called Loshon Hara. So Loshon Hara is basically to cause a negative of a perception of a person to increase. As opposed to if you're sharing information that's already out there and your intention is not to cause it to spread, then that would be allowed. Now, how do you avoid it? How do you avoid Loshon Hara? He says basically, when you're bored, then you get up to trouble. So occupy yourself with something valuable. If you know how to learn, then sit down and learn, and that will help you stay off WhatsApp or whatever else are the avenues that are causing gossip to spread. And even if you don't know how to learn, so just practice humility. Stay quiet. Don't spread it. So, continuing along the theme. Okay, so we're going to speak about types of circles of people which are not very good. Rabbi Yirmiyahu bar Abba said, the following four categories of people will not see the divine presence, and they are scorners, flatterers, liars, and those who speak Loshon Hara. Scorners can be inferred from the verse, he withdraws his hand from scorners. Rashi explains, that the Holy One, blessed be He, pulls away his hand, rejecting the company of scorners, meaning Hashem doesn't want to hang around people that scorn others. Flatterers can be inferred from the verse, a flatterer cannot come before him. Liars. So by the way, flattery is also a form of, well, it's not Loshon Hara, but it's also words that mislead. They're misleading words. I guess it's not words of bad per se, but they're words that are misleading. Liars may be inferred from the verse here. It tells lies will have no place before my eyes. Those who speak Loshon Hara from the verse, you are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil will not abide with you. Meaning, Rashi explains that the phrase evil will not abide with you refers to those who speak Loshon Hara, because it says in Tehillim, for there is no sincerity in their mouth. The Gemara concludes, since you are a righteous God, no evil can abide in your dwelling. Our rabbis have blessed every said, furthermore, all ridicule is forbidden except for ridiculing idol worship, for it is written, and it happened at noon that Eliyahu mocked them. So when the people were worshipping Baal, that Eliyahu ridiculed them. So if you're talking about people that are doing something bad, they can be ridiculed, or specifically idol worship. But otherwise, we should never be speaking bad about others. So this pretty much takes us to the end of the discussion about Loshon Hara, which is saying bad things about another person. Maybe tomorrow we'll move on to the next section, which speaks about revenge. So perhaps I'll just wrap it up with a few final thoughts that come to mind regarding Loshon Hara. The Gemara says that Loshon Hara destroys three people: the person who tells it, the person who listens to it, and the person that is spoken about. Now, the person who tells it and the person who listens to it, so that's quite understandable why these people are being negatively affected. But why also the person that is being spoken about? So, I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious. If you're going to speak Loshon Hara about somebody, then that is going to put him into a bad space. You're actually schmutzing him. In other words, when we speak, we have the power to impact. Words are powerful. And so if we speak badly about somebody, then we cause the negativity within that person to be highlighted. And then he becomes more bad. So based on this concept, the Rebbe explains that we do need to preoccupy ourselves in speaking good about people. Because just as the Gemara says, when you speak bad about a person, it actually destroys him. When you speak good about a person, you build him. The more you speak about his qualities, the more you bring out the good in him and the better a person he becomes. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, this doesn't mean to say something good about a person in front of his enemy, because then you're causing him more damage than good. But when it's not in that context, when it's the positive context, just as when we speak bad about another person, we bring the person down, so all the more so when we speak good about a person, we raise them. When we speak about their qualities, and we make them stronger and better people. I had one final thought. Yeah. And that is, this is what I like to think. If you're not sure if you should or shouldn't say something, I think there's a very easy formula. You got to ask yourself, would you say it if that person was standing in front of you right now? Because, I mean, that often it answers the question so quickly. You could say, no, it's nothing really bad. It's okay. But just, if he was here right now, would you be comfortable? Would you be comfortable him listening to what you're saying right now? If you realize your phone was on the line with him, and that's a pretty good tool to use. If you know that you wouldn't be comfortable sharing this in his presence, then you probably shouldn't be sharing it all together. Thanks for joining us. Wishing you a wonderful evening. And please, God, we'll learn more about negative character traits that we should avoid in